Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. Here's 5 tips that users of Cubase or any other DAW can use to improve their workflow. Let's do it. Working in the box means plugins, and plugins sometimes means latency. And if you're wondering what latency is, it's the time it takes a plugin to process the sound it's going in and spit it out on the other end. Now, not all plugins introduce latency. Some of them are instantaneous, but some other ones do. I put in the Abbey Road mastering plugin on this piano track just to give you a really good example of it. Right? That would be impossible to play to, right? So how do you know what plugin is creating the delay? Well, Cubase has this cool feature in the mixer window. We're going to go to that right now. And it's right down here. And in this case, it is right above the fader. If you go here in the setup window layout, that's channel latency right there. Right? So you can make sure that's turned on. And it tells you it's 180 milliseconds of delay due to these 3 plugins. But it also shows you exactly how much delay is on each plugin. The Neve preamps give me 1.8, the Sound City plugins give me 6, and the Abbey Road mastering plugin give me 173. That's the really bad offender right there. It also shows you the latency and samples, and it also tells you in the pop-up that that plugin would be disabled if you turn on constrained delay compensation. Now, constrained delay compensation is just a way to turn off immediately all the plugins that create delay, and then, oops, it helps if I click on the track. Allows you to play things in real time as opposed to when the plugins are on, you get the delay. So virtually all DAWs give you some version of freezing tracks, and they all give you some version of bouncing, or in Cubase's case, rendering in place. But what are the differences between the two? Freezing the track creates an invisible audio file that includes all the plugins on that track. It'll free up the CPU and cancel out any latency the plugins introduce. Now, for most people, this is the best option. Now, to do that here in Cubase, you would click this little icon here. It looks like a snowflake. If that's not showing, you go to Track Control Settings and move it over. It just says Freeze, right? So you would just move that into the Visible Controls column. When you click it, also make sure you've selected this, include inserts for instrument tracks, and hit OK, and it will freeze that track. So now you notice the inserts are all grayed out, and it plays back, and the region is locked because you can't mute that now because it's audio. Rendering in place in Cubase will process whatever region you have selected, not the entire track, and it'll place it on an audio track right below it. And you can specify how you want that to look using render selection. That's also found up here in Edit, Render in Place, Render Settings. So you can choose here the channel settings. I think I covered this in an earlier video, but you can select channel settings, which will then bounce all the plugins that are on that track. You can say how long you want the tail to be. You can even name it if you want. In this case, it's going to name it the same as the region, and it'll mute the one, the region that I'm bouncing. Here we go. Boom. And there is my rendered track. Now, of course, if you're freezing a track, it automatically disables the plugins. In this case, you would have to disable the track manually, which is, where is that? Here it is. So now that's disabled, and that piano track is rendered with the plugin sounds. We probably all know who that was. Now, why would I render a region as opposed to just freezing the whole track? Well, in film music, I do a lot of edits after I've written the cue. So once I've written the whole thing, they come back with a new cut of picture, and they've shortened the scene or something. I got to cut out sections. Well, if I have frozen tracks and I do an edit, cut out those bars, it doesn't cut what was frozen, and it doesn't also cut the regions that I froze. So if I do those edits, all those tracks that were frozen are left without the edits, and everything gets out of sync. So this is kind of a nice way for me that I can do those edits. I can also take that piece of audio and move it someplace else. Let's say I want to use that little same bit somewhere else, or I want to mangle it in a different way. It's kind of, I like having the actual audio. Some people don't like having a second track, but for me, this is a really efficient way of working, because otherwise I've got to unfreeze everything, do the edit, and then freeze it all back up again. This I can just cut it. Okay, next up, panners. Cubase has two types of panners. Now we're not including the surround stuff. The stereo balance panner and the stereo combined panner. The balance panner is the default one. You can pan to the left or you can pan to the right. Now the problem with that is if you have a stereo source and you pan all that stuff to the left, well, the material on the right side doesn't move to the left. It actually just disappears. Let me show you. Here's a ping pong delay of sorts. Ping, pong, ping, pong, ping, pong, ping, pong. Now, watch when I pan that hard left. Ping, 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 pong, 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 ping. So, as you can see, you lose half the material of a stereo source when you use the balance panner. To not have that happen, you use the stereo combined panner, which is right here. Now this one allows you to independently control the left and right channels. So here's the left channel and here's the right channel. And I can move them completely independently of each other. So I can put the left channel, keep it all the way hard left, and let's say put the right channel in the center. Ping, pong, ping, pong, ping, pong. Or I can reverse them. Ping, pong, ping. Or I can put them, let's say, keep them stereo, or just move the entire stereo source to a position a little bit left of center, for instance, right? Ping, pong, ping, pong. So this is kind of handy. So if you have, let's say, a stereo synth, right? It's got all kinds of cool delays or whatever, and you don't want to lose half of that, but you don't want it to be the full width, right? Because there's times you don't want every synth to be the full width of the stereo spectrum. It just gets too messy. Let's say I want to take that synth and just take its material and just put it right there, or just put it right here, like you're moving a boombox into a corner. It's still stereo, but it's a narrower field. So just know that the panner is there, the combined panner. It's a better way to pan. It gives you actually more control than the balance panner does. Okay, this next one applies to any DAW, or even if you're doing analog. It's a mixing tip, the 10% rule. This is something that I was told by an engineer many years ago, and I keep it in my mind to this day. The idea is when you're adding an effect to something, whether it's reverb or chorus or delays or whatever, once you get it to where you think it sounds right, you back it up 10%. The reason being is when you're first creating the sound or getting the sound, you get enamored by it, and so you go too far. And backing it up 10% usually gets it into the pocket, a sweet spot of where it really should end up. Now, of course, you watch these videos of all the great A-list engineers, and they're dialing in a sound, and they land right where they want. Well, that comes from years of experience. Those of us that don't have that level of experience, this is a good rule to follow, and it's just kind of it's a nice sort of safe way of working. And if you find that like backing it up 10% doesn't work, just always push it back up. But it's a good rule of thumb. Okay, so this last tip is about Quadrafuzz. Now, Quadrafuzz is a stock plugin for Cubase, and it's a multi-band distortion. I've showed it to you before on things like strings and brass. Strangely enough, you would put distortion on those, but it's usually just used to get a little edge. I'm going to show you how it works really well on synth basses, which is handy when you're doing hybrid type scores. So let's look here at the plugin. I've got it on a track that's got Zebra on it. I'm going to turn that all off. That's what the Zebra sounds like by itself. And here's with the Quadrafuzz on. Now, what it does here, it's got 4 bands, right? Low, low mid, and high. In each band, you can control the drive and the type of distortion that you put on it. Now, in this case, the high mids is where I want to add more grit to the sound. So I've just selected tube and drive. Quadrafuzz is kind of cool too because it's got 3 buttons here for 1 tube, 2 tubes, or 3 tubes. Now, what's also cool is that it even has, you can turn on a delay. That will add delay just to the band that you're working on. Now, in the old days, what they used to do was split the bass track, for instance, into 2 channels, and they would affect one for just the low end, meaning they'll keep the low end really clean, and then the other channel they would put on the distortion or change the EQ and just do that to the high end. In Pro Tools, you would actually make, in the old days, again, in Pro Tools, we'd make 2 tracks, and the same thing. You would just affect the low end in one, like cutting out all the high, and affect the high end in the other one and cutting out all the low using high pass and low pass filters. In this case, Quadrafuzz lets you do it all in one spot. And what's kind of neat is you can affect the width, because bass usually likes to be mono. It likes to be in the center. So I can take the width of the lowest and even the low mids down and just have, if you can hear, if you have headphones on, you can hear how the width is, it's wider for that range. Now, why do this? It helps the bass cut more by adding a little grit. You can get a more perceived loudness by just adding those upper harmonics than just by turning the bass up. Now, if you're not in Cubase, there's a couple others. Saturn from FabFilter and Thermal from Output are some options if your DAW doesn't have this built in. It's a nice thing about Cubase, it has it built in. So that's my 5 tips for January. If you have any tips of your own that you want to share, put them in the comments below. Maybe I'll throw them into the video for next month. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit all those buttons, and I will catch you guys on the next one. Thanks.